Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Esports Research Report. I'm Steph Orm from Emmanuel College in Boston.
And I'm Brian McCauley here at the Media Management and Transformation Center in Jönköping in Sweden. And today our guests are both from Shenandoah University in the States. And we have a newly minted doctor, James Arwen Hardwick, who got his doctorate 5 days ago. And Joey, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Garisiak, Director of Esports and a doctor of 8 years. So he's got 8 years on Aaron. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks. That was not bad. You got Garisiak, but you don't ever have to say that. Say G or just hey you or any of that's fine.
Yeah, if you're cool, we call him Doc G. Because that's
Doc G, love it.
Brian's over there struggling with that.
So
anyway, Americans.
Yeah.
Oh man!
Just to get to know a little bit more about each of you, Aaron, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a bit more first?
Yeah. So I just finished my doctorate here at Shenandoah in orchestral conducting at the conservatory. I'm a professional conductor as well as instrumentalist, amateur gamer. Of course, the kind of inventor of the We Play Together project, which we'll talk a little bit about. But so happy to be here, and again, met Joey a little bit and earlier, and really enjoyed the esports program here at Shenandoah, and we became quick friends, and so that's why we're here, so thank you.
Super cool. And then Joey, what about you? You're the director of esports at Shenandoah?
Yeah. I'm the director of esports here. I'm also an associate professor of esports because we do have an academic component to it. We have a major, minor concentrations, MBA concentration, as well as the undergrad, some certificates. So yeah, I teach there as well. I'm a former professor of sport management here at the university. My background is in sport management, but I've always been a competitive gamer as well. And competed in Halo when I was at the University of Georgia, and Halo 1, not 2 or 3, any of the other crap that came after it, just the original, the only good one that was out there. So yeah, I started the program here about 3 years ago, and I oversee the academic and the competitive side, as well as the Esports Arena, which is what Aaron and I are in right now. We have a number of students in the program. We're finally getting some graduates out there. And, really enjoyed all the different things we've been doing with esports here, because it's so much more than just playing video games, as is indicative about the project Aaron came up with, the We Play Together idea. There are a lot of other worlds that can be associated with esports than just playing video games. And here at the university, we like to say that we go beyond gaming. And this project that Aaron came up with, and that I was a very small part of, is just one of those examples about how we do that. And so, yeah, it's a good program. It's a growing program. And we just continue to find ways to try to re-innovate what esports and gaming can mean for students as an educational opportunity.
Now, before I ask you your definition of esports, like, what is this room you're in, this venue you seem to possess at your university, with branding on the floor, big lights we just saw, screens? Is this a competitive arena?
This is the Esports Arena right on campus in Winchester, Virginia. It holds up to about 80 spectators. It's got a stage for up to 6-on-6 competition, and we use it as the esports hub on campus, where students will use it, yes, for some classroom space and some learning, but really it's used mostly by our competitive teams for practice space, competitions. We hold meetings in here. We can do events in here. Our students use it as a living lab space, so they can run events on this smaller scale, but get their hands-on learning so that can transition to large-scale esports events or other types of entertainment events, just to get that hands-on experiential learning, which is a big part of our curriculum. And then we also have a broadcast production booth, which is off that way, that our students can learn the broadcast production side, content creation, graphic design, overlay streaming, the actual shoutcasting. Our students put on full broadcasts here. So it's a great space. It's really cool. Me and Aaron spent some time making sure the lighting looked good in here and making sure we would look okay. But it's that hub that we have right here on campus that we can bring in outside events, use it for our students here, get their hands on. So it's really a multi-purpose venue that is one of the first of its kind. And a lot of schools are trying to, a lot of schools have esports arenas, but they're really computer labs. We wanted to make sure we had a space that mimicked what students might see if they were working in professional esports. So that's why we built it the way we did, and we've outgrown it. So we're looking to expand. So hopefully the university hears this and they can hear about how valuable it would be to expand the space that we have. But yeah, it's been open for about a year at this point, and we've survived COVID. Knock on wood. Hopefully it doesn't come back. And so we're going to be able to open it to full capacity starting next year again, because we've been limited over the past year and a half. So we're just ready to rock and roll in it. It's a great space.
Awesome.
I'm so jealous. If anyone from my university is watching, they've outgrown this. We don't even have this yet. Somebody get on it, please. So look, I mean, I've a funny feeling that, Joey, you've got the definition of esports down. So I'm going to let the musician go first with his definition of esports, because he's probably spent less time writing in drafts of papers the definition of esports. So Aaron, or James, I don't know how to call you this, by the way. It's Aaron.
Yeah. My mom's the only one that can call me. She's going to be watching this later. So James, so it's only when I'm in trouble. So don't. Yeah, Aaron, please.
Okay, yeah. So Dr. Hardwick, get used to that.
There it is. There it is.
There it is.
Yeah, the 5 days you got to get used. What's your definition of esports? What is it to you?
Yeah, esports, of course. My introduction to it was actually very similar. Joey and I's story background is very, very similar. We started on Halo as my first. I was a PC guy for a long time in college, original Call of Duty and stuff like that, and really started to get into the world of competitive gaming when I was playing Halo. And we used to have LAN parties at my house. My wife's going to be watching this too. We call them 6 to 6 parties. We would start at 6 p.m. and go all the way to 6 a.m. in the morning, and up to 16 TVs sometimes spread out in my house, and played a lot of Halo and played some local things, amateur tournaments, stuff like that, and really loved it. When it comes to esports itself, of course, competitive gaming, but I think it goes beyond that, kind of like Joey was saying. There's so many other things to esports, and that are super important. How we practice, how we play, how we think is really, really important. And even as an amateur gamer and as a musician, I understood that, early on, and just as a gamer, just love at the end of the day, the joy of doing what we do. And those similarities as a musician too are there. I love music. That's why I do what I do, but I also love gaming. And there's just this level of joy and discovery like that we all share in that when we play games and also play music. So for me, that's kind of what it means, and that's what it is.
And Joey, I mean, are you going to give us a more technical one? Because we kind of got a little bored of that, so we're going to ask, what is it to you?
I mean, I could get really long-winded, but I could also keep it real simple. Let's be concise and pragmatic here, right? Esports is competitive gaming. I can leave it as simple as that. And I know we can get into all these different definitions, and I have a traditional sports background, and so defining what sports is something I've done over the past decade and a half. And there are about 7.5 billion people in the world. There's about 7.5 billion different definitions about what sport is. So when you talk about esports, there's a ton of different definitions out there. So I try to leave it as broad as I can, that esports is competitive gaming. When you're playing a video game and it's in a competitive setting, that is an esport. And I know that's really broad and basic, but I got to keep it simple in a lot of ways, because a lot of people don't understand what is esports, what is not esports. Is it only team-based games? Is it only PC-based games? Is speed running an esport? I would say yes, because it's competitive in that you have other people trying to compete to be the best one. There's a winner and there's a losers, or a lot of losers. And so that's to me what esports is by definition. And as Aaron was saying, it means so much more than that to us, because it's what we work in on a daily basis. And we see the value that esports can offer to this current generation of students and future generations of students. And the real value that it has is that, like I mentioned earlier, it's an educational opportunity. It's a way to engage students in a way that people haven't been able to engage students before. These, younger millennials and Gen Zers, and getting into whatever the next generation is called. I don't know what these tech natives that are used to technology, that are used to interactive technology, not even passive technology. They don't watch TV on cable anymore. That doesn't exist. Everything is streamed. Everything is interactive. It's engaging in Twitch chats. It's being able to watch their streamers on social media. So it's using that technology, using that passion, and then instilling this idea of gaming and competitive gaming in a way that teaches students skills that can be applied to their future careers to help them be successful. Whether those are soft skills like communication, teamwork, adaptability, or other things like how to set up PCs and hardware. I'm not a PC guy. I'm a console guy. I mentioned Halo earlier. I'm an all Xbox. I was an all Xbox guy growing up. I'm still only on console. My students make fun of me. They call me a boomer because I don't play on keyboard and mouse. I'm not making that change. I'm old and set in my ways. And so
Come on,
I'm
now,
sticking to it.
no. Hold on. You can do it.
No.
I did it last year. I got the Gold Nova 2, still the highest I've gotten. But, I did do it this year. Like, I went to keyboard and mouse. It just took a little bit of time, but I'm 2 years older than you. You can do it. Okay,
Well,
I'm
I'm proud of you, Brian. That's great. It's not for me. I don't know. And honestly, I was going to buy a PC about 6 months ago before the graphics cards got so incredibly expensive. And all of a sudden I can't buy a PC for less than my paycheck. And so it's really, really tough to get one right now because of the semiconductor shortage. So I'm waiting. Brian, I'll get there. Maybe by the time I hit 40, I'll be able to get on the keyboard and mouse without my forearms getting sore. But I'm so used to that controller in my hand because of my Xbox days. And now I'm on PlayStation, so I don't even play Xbox anymore. But yeah, esports and competitive gaming, it means so much more than just playing video games. It's finding something else and finding a way to benefit students and the future generations in a way that is more than just the stereotypical in their parents' basement, eating Cheetos, drinking Mountain Dew, eating pizza kind of video game. As Aaron said, it's those LAN parties, but those LAN parties are so much more than playing video games. It's that social connectiveness that comes out of that. And again, it's strategy, it's leadership, communication. Those are skills that we need to instill in future generations that can be used through this different mechanism, this different medium, which is gaming and competitive gaming or esports. So there's so much more to it. But put simply, Brian, that's a really long answer, but I'm an academia person. I can't talk apparently, but it's so much more than competitive gaming. But at its core, that's what esports is.
Yeah, I agree. So, you've answered my question there. Absolutely, the two of you, brilliant. Steph.
Yeah, let's get down to this project. I really want to hear about it. So tell us first and foremost, kind of what it is, how it got started.
Aaron, all you.
Yeah, no, it was. First of all, I have to take a minute. I mean, it's due to Joey and his enthusiasm, and I've talked to the team here, the esports department, and just thanked them. This project started really with me over COVID. I doing what I do, which is I was working on my doctorate, teaching classes, of course. And then, I decided to take a break. And during my break, I'm a big Apex Legends guy. I love Apex. I got into that a couple of years ago and play actually pretty much every day just to blow off steam and to get better. And I was sitting in my living room and it just hit me. It was like it was a light bulb moment for me when I was in the firing range. I was practicing, and as a professional musician, as a conductor, I was like, this is the same thing. Muscle memory, audio response, I'm reacting to what's going on. And then literally, I was playing for like 30 minutes and I kind of put the game on pause, came away from my controller because I'm a controller guy too. So Joey and I are on the same team. I'm an Xbox guy. For those haters out there, it's fine. We got major players on the scene using controllers now, so that's no longer an argument. So I want to hear that. But the idea there, I got pulled out my phone and I literally just started. Actually, the draft that I came up with on my phone that day, I ended up turning into a proposal to the business school here for the project itself. So we play together a collaboration between music and esports, highlights that idea of performance and pedagogy. And practice, how we practice, how we teach esports. I mean, this is a big thing when we talk about curriculum, right? Joey and I have had these conversations. My background as an educator, I have a K-12 certification. I did that for 13 years before I became a professional conductor and got my master's and doctorate. So I've been on curriculum committees and know how all this stuff works. And I saw those things right out of the gate, like how we approach teaching, right, and learning is really, really at the forefront of this. And esports is, again, because of the inherency of the innovation, is something that is really important in how students learn and how they approach a game, how they approach what they're doing. And with the project, we, of course, found out, this idea of just awareness, bringing an awareness to when you're playing. What are you listening to? What are you actually doing? And how we can teach students and encourage them to learn and practice even better, right? But also listening, and then perform. What do we do when we're in those moments of stress and it is competition time? As professional musicians, we have the same thing. When I go out on stage, and there's 3,000 people or 1,000 or even 10 in the house, that's the same. And we actually have many years of teaching students in the performance setting how to mitigate those things, and the conversations around that, with classical training. So that all kind of just hit me, and I started writing. And then Joey and I brought it before Joe. I think it was over a beer, here in Winchester, and we were just sitting down. And he was man, I love the idea. Let's do it, And so I just have to thank him so much for his encouragement and just that, willingness to jump on board. And then what came out of it was awesome.
Yeah, and I will say that it was all Aaron on this. I'm happy to support and say, yeah, let's do it, when somebody else is the one doing it, and I can just say, yeah, that kind of came under me too. It was totally part of my idea. But no, Aaron has been like the driving force behind this, and it took a beer or 7 for me to really understand exactly what this was, because it's very high level thinking, and I'm just not that high level of a thinker, especially when it comes to music. I love classical music. I love Triforce Quartet. Aaron and I talk about them all the time because that's the only one I can name. But they do some really cool stuff, and this idea, I was like, I have no idea how music and esports mixes, but I was like, dude, all right, if you have an idea, let's do it. Sure, you know more than I do. So he's been able to run with it. And the proposal, this is some of the most thorough proposal stuff that I've ever seen in my life. And like we did like a dress rehearsal for this. Like in my world, in the esports world, we're like, oh, we're going to be on some kind of show or podcast. Yeah, we'll throw it together in 20 minutes and get on there and see what happens. But with Aaron, it was like he comes from that background where they get their stuff together, and it is like by the minute. Here's when things are happening, and we got to do a dress rehearsal. We're doing this time is call for everybody. Here's this how many seconds we're talking about this subject. I was like, this is some intense stuff, but the product that came out of it was incredible. So it really does come down to Aaron's vision, me saying, "Yep, let's do it," and then Aaron running with it. We talked earlier, Aaron and I did, about we just need like the creative freedom to run with these ideas that we have, because esports and everything around technology moves so quickly. When you've got these ideas, you got to run with it, and you got to see what comes out of it. It might be awesome, and it might be absolutely terrible. And I've had plenty of those that are absolutely terrible, but you got to try stuff. And so the idea of trying something like this innovative idea, was something that just like, it finally clicked when Aaron told me enough about it. I was like, yeah, we got to do this. And Aaron, yeah, do it. Go for it. Let me know what I can do to support. Have it in the arena. Let me know if we need other students or other people to talk on this panel. And we'll get into all those details. But yeah, it was a really cool idea that he came up with. And after enough liquid libations, I was like, yep, let's do it. Sounds like a great idea. And it was an awesome product.
So what I'm taking away here is that I miss the days when you could pitch ideas over a beer. Hopefully they'll be back again soon. Your whole networking concept, and but it does work. Like
it does work.
I do research. Yeah, that's what networking is. Have a drink with someone, chat, get to know them. So this is like, you're director of esports. What is a director of esports? Just to clarify for someone maybe like me who's in Europe, and what I mean. What does that mean? I mean, you teach stuff, you run stuff, you tell Aaron he can do this stuff, and
I don't know what it means. I don't know. I make it up. I make it up on a daily basis at this point. They just like bestow that title. It's like, oh, you're in charge of esports. I'm like, what? What do?
That's the answer.
Somebody help. I need an adult. I don't know. No, it's so what a director of esports does, because we have them across colleges in the U.S. now, especially because collegiate esports is growing so rapidly, especially on the competitive side. Right. So the typical what a director of esports typically refers to in a college campus is somebody that is almost like a head coach that oversees all the teams and all the competitive aspects of an esports program. So getting their teams registered, making sure their students are eligible for competition, finding scrimmages, doing some coaching, doing some VOD review. But really, it's about finding competition, securing resources for their players, maintaining eligibility for their players, and really just kind of managing that side of things. For me, it's a little different because Shenandoah has not just the competitive side, but also the academic side. So I oversee both sides of that here at the university. And there are some other directors that do that. Chris Haskell at Boise State, very similar in that way, where it's that higher level that I've got an assistant director that works under me that runs the day-to-day stuff and manages all the competitions and all the teams. I've also got another instructor of esports here that he and I work together on the curriculum, who's teaching what classes, going over what needs to be changed and adjusted. So my job is really, it's finding opportunities. It's looking at the strategic direction of the program, developing partnerships, finding funding for our program. Things like, here, plug Respawn Chairs, a great partner of ours, that we are able to save money on chairs
you're doing promos in the educational podcast. Oh God, this is the
just throw
European
them
me.
in there. Yeah, I got to do a shameless plug. Yeah, I love Respawn Chairs. Yeah, Washington Justice, thanks for the help. I'll throw those plugs out there all the time because they want to work with us because of the things that we're doing are more than just playing video games. We're getting students prepared to enter into careers, potentially in esports, but also outside of esports, through some of the skills they learn through esports in the program that we have. So yeah, Brian, my position is a little different than what typically another director would be. But usually a college esports director is the one that's managing their competitive side and organizing their teams for competition at the national and local level.
I mean, it's collaboration between multiple departments. So we have the music guys, right? Aaron, that's your thing. Joey, you kind of look over the esports thing. Where else are we bringing departments in Shenandoah?
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think, and I think this project was one of those kind of ways that even during this time of COVID, where we really highlighted those things, and it was just a testament to what we kind of do here at Shenandoah. And it's part of the reason why I came here, this atmosphere that we create. But yeah, even in this, I mean, we have the MPRT, which is our music production and recording technology department, and on this project, we had to work close together with miking and video and things like that. Of course, Dr. Michelle Pye, who was on the panel with our athletic training and performance fitness and health and those kind of things was part of that conversation. So it's a place where there's a lot of collaborative learning that goes on here. With the conservatory, again, we look to be innovative in what we do and how we think and when it comes to performance. So I thought this was a great opportunity to do it, but from our side as performers, I think it's a very similar conversation and kind of what I don't know, it's just kind of the atmosphere here. It's just kind of what we do, it's kind of who we are.
I'm totally jealous. I mean, I think it's America has sort of got a head start on the whole college scene and what's there for students right now. But we do talk about this a fair bit, and I make fun of America, of course, because Steph's here and now you guys are here, so
I get it a
no
lot.
problem doing it again. Yeah. But there's a thing that we've kind of seen is that the patriotism of America. Of course, you've got the stuff still down at the Pledge of Allegiance, but there's an identity with universities that's maybe not quite here in Europe. It's I went here, where did that guy in the office go? Andy went to, the Ivy League place. So I think that do you think that helps with the American scene that there's you guys really love where you go to university? And I just went to university. I didn't go, I'm here, I don't have any sweatshirts from my university.
Yeah, you know what it is, Brian? It's the fact that in America, we've got the NCAA collegiate esports model where people just identify with their school, a lot of times based on sports, right? And based on competition. It's a way to brag about their school. And again, I come from that traditional sports background and research in traditional sports. It's fan identification. And so a lot of collegiate esports or collegiate sports fans highly identify with where they went to school, especially if it's what's called Division I football or men's basketball. Those are the two revenue generating sports at the collegiate level. But there are so many different kinds of competitions at the collegiate level. People like to brag that I'm the best. And that's an American spirit to an extent, I guess, that people like to say, oh, we're the best. We're better than that school. That school is terrible. And so there's where that identification and that allegiance comes in. And that's when you start wearing shirts. I went to University of Georgia for my degrees. I got a big old Georgia G on my truck right outside. So, I'll wear my Shenandoah stuff, but when it's a Saturday and Georgia's playing football, by God, I'm a Bulldog through and through. And so, yeah, it's that identification. But I guess the same thing kind of goes with esports now. And that's why we're seeing this surge of esports at the collegiate level, because a lot of times it fits into that model of American collegiate sports that we've seen through baseball, basketball, football, volleyball, lacrosse, whatever. And esports is that kind of next generation of competition at the collegiate and high school and also middle school level now in the States that becomes organized, and teams are based at schools, not based at clubs, which is much a European model where you have these, football clubs. That's a very different model than what we have in the States, where you play for a school, not for a club. And so that's where a lot of this comes from, is that passion and that drive that we see. And that's where that explosion for esports has come at the university setting. And as Aaron was saying earlier, interdisciplinary is huge in what we do. When I talk to schools about setting up curriculum and academic side of esports, I have five or six different criteria that are needed for that. And one of them is an interdisciplinary approach, because esports is not just an industry, it's an ecosystem that draws on so many different areas, like music and the conservatory, which is what we do at a very high level at SU. It draws on athletic training and performance like we do here at SU. It also draws on like computer design and technology. We don't do that well yet at SU, but it draws on the coaching side, the management side, the media management, the media production side. There are so many different layers to esports that you can draw on all these other different parts of a university, and that's what makes it so interdisciplinary. But all that stuff kind of adds up to this explosion we're seeing at the collegiate level. But really, it comes from that passion that we have for college sports anyway. And this is just a different kind of competition that this current generation understands so much more than they do, like, I don't know, lacrosse or swimming. That's just not as popular to kids these days as esports is.
Well, lacrosse is just in American movies, by the way. That's just where that exists in Europe. It's like Stifler out of American Pie. I mean, that's pretty much it.
Don't use him as a model for an American college student or high school student.
Oh, guys, you don't realize the image you send across. When you said you're an esports head coach, I was just thinking all those movies where the head coach kills somebody. Or there's so many of them.
I know. Good old American.
Any given Sunday.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
that sort of stuff.
Well, we do take it seriously, but maybe not that seriously. American football at the high school and college level is a whole different level.
Yeah, religion.
Wasn't The Waterboy the seminal American football college movie?
But that is not the typical American experience. Don't judge us based on.
Oh man, what is happening?
My podcast. Steph, let's do it.
There you go.
Blame her for not stopping me. I mean, I think this is fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
Like, what's the next stage of this project?
Yeah, I think, and Joey and I've spoken about this. We would like to. I think expansion is a big part of that. Seeing this other places, and tagging up what Joey just said. I think one of the keys here is this transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary, as we call it.
Mm-hmm.
They go in that word moving beyond, right? Is something that, again, if we're going to move forward with the next generation of students, regardless of what you study, I mean, this is the future, right? This is what we're talking about. It's no longer staying in your lane and just kind of being very myopic with how you address a certain topic. It's because our global society is so small, right? And understanding of how things work, we have to bring other people in, and this idea of collaboration and transdiscipline is key in doing that. And history hasn't been very nice to people who just refuse to innovate in that way. And when it comes to this project, I think it just can only get bigger. When we take a look at, just from a professional side, of course, we had, Mary Bowden, trumpet, world-class trumpeter here on the panel, and being able to understand, like, hey, at that level, when you are performing in front of 5,000 people, that's the kind of information that our students need when they hopefully to whatever arena they're going to be in, to be able to respond and learn and adjust and be able to communicate with other people, to work with other people from other areas, because it's no longer going to be just them, hey, I'm doing this thing and this is the only people I talk to. No, it's going to incorporate so many other areas of life and study. And so to prepare them for that is really key. And so this project, I think, highlights some of those things. And I think the next step would be to just make it bigger, to expand it, allow other people to be part of it, and to see where it goes from there. And we're working on this kind of things right now, what it means, the name and nomenclature of We Play Together, and the idea behind it and the origins and all that stuff. But yeah.
Do you see this having potential effects, in the pro scene eventually? Like, would that be something to kind of, the lessons that you're learning and the skills that you're, teaching these students? Do you hope that that's something industry would really latch onto in the future?
Yeah, Joe, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Aaron, we were talking about this earlier. I was saying,
Yeah.
you take it away because I love the ideas that where to take this next because it's just the start right now. But Aaron has some ideas already, so I'll let you kind of expand on that.
Yeah. So one of the things we were talking about, of course, the format here was to highlight, a performance, right, with a classical music performance, and again, just getting the audience to understand the similarities between what's actually happening with fingers, and then having a conversation afterwards, because that necessarily can't happen obviously in real time with a musician. They're performing, right, or even somebody playing a competitive game can be talking about exactly what's going on. They want to focus on, either the music or the game. So at the pro level, right, that's another level. Again, when we talk about music, when you arrive, for lack of better terms, when you're performing on a regular basis, again, the similarities are so striking. That's another level of performance, right? Performance itself is an art form. How we teach, how we think. A lot of professionals in gaming as well as in music, right? Their conversations are different once they move beyond that kind of like original student idea, and that's key, like moving them into that area. So hearing from professionals, but also most importantly, there are, the classical tradition itself is so, we have so much history, right? We have so much training, we have so much pedagogy, we have all these skills that we can pass on. And then also esports is new, right? It's this innovative and inherently innovative, and uses technology. So when the two can inform one another, I believe. And so that's powerful in today's world. And I could see, again, the kind of constructs, the frameworks that we use for training at the really top level, and the conversations that we have as musicians could completely benefit, could reduce times, right, of training, how we practice, how a pro player could really take their game to the next level and have that competitive edge. Has to do with practice. It has to do with how we learn, pedagogy, right, and then how we perform. And so those three aspects of this project really came about, and I could see that happening definitely at the pro level for sure.
What excites me so much about that is, one of the huge issues, right, that we know happens in the pro scene is burnout from the practice and the current training they do. So like thinking about this as a really innovative new kind of training to supplement that, right? Like, I think could really sort of freshen up that experience for players who are really feeling the grind of, the 50, 60 hour week of training, just kind of sitting at the computer, right, and like going crazy. So yeah, I think that's really awesome that y'all are kind of pushing the envelope on like what training can be. That I think is really exciting.
Yeah, and just to quickly add to that, in the music world, we encountered this all the time. One of the many studies that we talk about are Suzuki students, right? If you're not familiar with Suzuki, when we start, violin or piano with students that are 3 and 4 years old, and I used to teach, little ones as well, and this is a same conversation we have in music. Burnout happens when they get to like middle school. A lot of students are like, I've been doing this since I was 4. I'm exhausted, and then the physical aspect, right? Like, wrists start going at a young age. And we know in athletics, in sports as well, that we want to keep our athletes safe. We want to keep them healthy. And this is something that it is a conversation we have at the professional level as well with athletics, and as well as, of course, with esports. So I think the two can inform one another. And as we saw on the panel, Dr. Pai was really good about giving us some actual strategies to talk about that. Because there's some real hard research that if we stay in our lane and we just think myopically, we're not going to find it. But if we go to other places that are like doing similar things, that have similar tracks, we'll find those things. And I think this highlighted it.
I mean, that's an interesting point there about the actual research. So what sort of research is planned around this now? Because, Aaron, you've got to start publishing research, and Joey, you work with a lot of people I know. I mean, there must be a plan here to actually publish this and share it and make it impactful, which is probably the most important thing for me with research, especially when, esports people are so willing to engage with us as researchers compared to, well, most of the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had that conversation early on. And I think between the three of us, Dr. Pai and Joey and myself, we want to approach it firstly from an academic and an educational side, because first and foremost, this is multifaceted. Like we've already, just within our 5-minute conversation, I mean, there's so many other areas that if you wanted empirical research on that could absolutely happen. We could start tracing, practice times. We could start tracing, mobility, right, with tactile things. We could actually measure. So what we wanted to do was highlight these things, and I informed everyone that was part of the project. Look, we're not here to answer specific empirical questions. What we want to do is bring more questions to the table and provide those venues of people that are really experts in those fields to take this. So our next steps are from an educational standpoint, right? Making like how we highlighted this from a cross-curricular interdisciplinary thing and saying, hey, look, this can be possible. And not only possible, we can now back this up with this project. And then we can say, hey, look, in the future, we'd like to go ahead and start studying trends and how students practice and how they perform and all of those kind of things. So initially, we want to make sure that we take that from a pedagogy, well, not only a pedagogy side, but from a kind of open-ended educational side, if you will, as an angle. Yeah.
I've had a cat enter the room. She's learned to open the sliding door. I can't do anything. I mean, it's just as someone who mightn't have a perspective, you've got that 5,000 hour, that 10,000 hour trope sort of maybe, but like Aaron, like in terms of where you get to be a world-class trumpeter or the instruments you play, what sort of level of practice is there in terms of hours and dedication?
Yeah. It's a lot, man. Of course, you can't. And I think that's I was watching a number of just kind of pro player esports folks too. I follow a number of Apex guys and stuff like that, talk about grind hours, right? And again, just a translation of terminology to practice. I'm a violist. I'm a classically trained violist, and I've done violin as well. I've done the two, and of course, being a conductor, just hours of time spent in front of a score, piano, or whatever. To practice.
Wait. What's a viola and what's a violin? This is how ignorant I am
my
here. Like,
goodness.
Oh boy.
So a viola is a big violin. That's what that is.
The cello?
No, it's not a cello.
What's in between?
This is.
Yes,
No.
it's in between those two.
It's in between those two. Yeah, they're held the same. I didn't bring it today because
Look, you're American. You have crab cakes and they're not sweet. So there's differences.
Oh.
Maybe I'm just not down on my orchestra speak.
Sweet crab cakes.
Sweet crab cakes.
That was my nickname in high school.
Sweet meats aren't what they sound like either. So terminology. So it's an in between. It's a larger violin.
It's a large. I've spent my career trying to explain it. Look, I came from people are trying to. Yeah, it's a little bigger of a violin. We sit in the orchestra in the middle. Provide harmonic context for everything. Without us, it'd be hard to have Brahms or Beethoven or any of those guys. But yeah, it's one of those things where it takes an incredible amount of commitment. And Steph, you brought up the idea of burnout too, and because it is. I mean, this is a real thing. When it comes to high level performing artists, all of us go through, this kind of self doubt and you're working hours and hours and on end. And as a conductor, this is really important for me because again, everything's conceptual, right? Like, I don't have an orchestra at my home. I can't just, I have to do everything in my head. And then when I get in front of these incredibly talented musicians that are professional and many times much older than I am and have been in it a long time, I have to be able to perform in that venue. And so again, for esports, this is the same thing. As this continues to be more normative, right? You're going to have a generation of players that have been in it a long time that can have something to pass on. The key is how are we talking about those things? What is the language? What are we doing? Are we capturing that? And again, in the classical tradition, we have a history of that. So the two can really work together well.
Yeah, and to go off like the number of hours, I mean, I think Malcolm Gladwell said, 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything. I've heard Rocket League players, one of the top in the world, Squishy Muffins, that's his gamer tag. I think he said he put 13,000 hours into Rocket League at this point. And so it takes a lot of hours, obviously. And as we've been talking about, that burnout is a real thing, not just in esports, but it could be playing an instrument, it could be traditional sports. I think that diversification of practices is important, but also focus practice to focus on one certain thing instead of just playing for 6 or 7 hours. just kind of generically not working on a certain skill is important as well.
Mhm.
And we learned that from Michelle Pye, Dr. Pye, through this project. That really helps, but also this idea again, diversification of what you're doing helps. So kids today, unfortunately, will play baseball all year round. Instead of playing baseball in the spring, they might do football in the fall, maybe wrestling in the winter. They'll focus on one specific sport and try to play that year round. And if they're a pitcher, they're a pitcher. They're not a pitcher and a shortstop and a this and a that. And if they're a pitcher, they're probably throwing curveballs, which is horrible for kids' arms to throw curveballs. And so I think that that's leading to mental and physical burnout, is that it's so sport specific and sport focused instead of that diversification of different sports.
Mhm.
Same thing with esports, right? You've got to diversify and play different games. Don't just play Overwatch or don't just play Rocket League. Play other games. Play an RPG for God's sake at some point, just to have fun with gaming again, and to give yourself a different look, give your brain a break. So that idea of burnout, we see that across things, and 13,000 hours to be at one of the highest, if not the highest level of Rocket League. Yeah, you can see how some kids get burned out by the time they get to middle school, high school, or even to college now, because they're starting so young in playing instruments, in playing Rocket League or esports, in playing baseball. So I think across activities, we've got to be careful as we continue to move forward with keeping things in mind on the physical and the mental and emotional side, and how important that is to diversify what they're doing to keep them healthy as long as possible.
Yeah, and real quickly, I'll add on to, as musicians, what we've seen too is young musicians who brought up through this process of being really focused on one instrument or things like that. There's so many issues with then once they break out of that, then what, right? It's difficult to be socialized, like, being able to fit into a workforce. If, again, this is highly competitive. We're talking about, this, again, we're talking about sport and we're talking about performance. Not everybody makes it. And that's something that's a reality. And so we have to understand that in today's market, in today's world, having diversity is a skill set that you need. It's not something that's like, oh yeah, I should do, I should play something else. No, you have to, and you have to be able to expand beyond that. Otherwise, you're not gonna make it. You're not gonna be marketable, but also you're what do you want to be, make sure that you add to the conversation, right? And to kind of perpetuate either the art form or the sport itself, right?
You're the first conductor I've ever met, right? And, I've met magicians, and like they're not really cool when you hang out with them. They're cool when they're doing the magic, right? So, what sort of nut job becomes a conductor? Is that like is that like a goalkeeper in football? Is that like people go, what are you doing? Don't do it. Is that like?
Yeah, I actually just finished up my beginning conducting class here at Shenandoah, teaching them, and there's no holds bar on that. We're a special breed, and I don't fit. I say that, I think the model of what a conductor looks like. Again, we have these kind of biases of what that looks like. I don't fit into that model. I have a very unique background. I've done a lot of. I think part of the reason this project was something of my brain, is just kind of who I am. I don't look just to one area. I never like this. Yeah, right, exactly. I can just count to 4. That's why
that's
I'm not.
That's all you got to do.
Right. That's why I wasn't in math. I just counted 4. I'm good.
I'm asking this. There's a point. I mean, it's when you listen to, say, Astralis and the communication that happens in CS:GO or something like that, and the coaching that happens, and the complexity of leading a team.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Is there parallels there with conducting, where you're managing so many moving parts in such a stressful environment? Is that an angle of leadership, the conductor, the coach, the team leader sort of stuff that could happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the kind of part that really came out at the beginning of this project, from my end too, is that when I'm sitting there with a squad of people playing Apex, right? It's a high stress situation again, and I'm not even playing competitively as far as professionally, but as a conductor, right? When you're in that moment, responding to those moments and understanding that, yes, you're listening and you're responding in real time to what's happening. And if you're a leader, right, as you pointed out, Brian, which is great, that you then also have to lead. You have to keep that in mind. Like, what direction do we take? And Professor Chris Scroggins we talked a lot about that here during the project. That awareness, again, bringing to this level, that's the magic key, right? Having a level of awareness and being able to apply that in different situations is really the key to learning and growing in esports and music. Again, every performance, esports or music, is never the same. They're never the same. I can play, a Bach sonata, and it will never be the same twice. I can conduct a Brahms symphony. It will never be the same twice. There's too many variables, and being able to understand that and lead people through that, there's a skill set to that. There's training to that, and the same goes for esports. And I think I found that fascinating, and that we could help one another in those things.
I mean, yeah, look, you say it'll never be the same. To me, it would sound the same. But then if I showed my dad 2 different CSGO games, he'd just be looking at it going, yeah, there's just something happening on screen here. You have to be experienced to actually understand that complexity. Steph, could you tell the difference between 2 of his performances? Would you be able to go, oh, he's a bit off today, or this is a bit faster?
I don't know. It depends. Depends on how off it really was. But yeah, no, assuming you're a good composer, which I am, assuming. I'd agree with that. I think it probably takes a heightened sensitivity and an understanding of those things, right? To realize what's actually going on and what's different about them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And so just so you guys know, I mean, like and Joey and I've talked a little bit about this too, and it is because it's a very small world of conducting. When I'm on the podium, my job is to not only be really hyper aware of every single musician that's, if there's an oboe solo or a cello solo or whatever, to be able to respond. And actually in real time, I had an argument with somebody one time. I was like, that's not possible. Being able actually in the moment to have enough flexibility to respond to the player and also lead them. And this happens in opera, of course, all the time when you have things that are constantly moving parts, right? And you're in charge of directing them. And again, we talked about this with esports, when the students are in a team-based game and knowing when to be where, and then relying on somebody to make those calls. Again, it's very similar, very similar.
Yeah, the whole adaptability. I was just thinking, in sports, when you see esports, you see like teams try the same strategies again and again and again, right? I remember it was like the 2nd or 3rd season of Boston's Overwatch team, right? When we started being terrible, like the worst in the league after having a really good year. And it was literally because like they kept just trying to shove through the same strategy again and again and again. And it was like, why are you, like the meta's changed? What do you, like, you can't keep trying to shove the same solution through. And that's what they kept doing. And there was no communication, no willingness to adapt or respond to a changing environment. So like, I hear you describing what happens with conducting an orchestra. And I'm like, yeah, that is esports. Like
it is. Get off of the goats. No more goats. Get away from that meta.
Exactly.
Double bubble. We're a double bubble now.
Stop.
That's right.
Took them like 2 years to figure that out.
I know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and again, there's the ideas of similarity here really, really just incredible.
Yeah.
I've just got one last question, Joey. With the esports programs, what happens with the coaches? Who coaches the coaches? Who polices the police? I mean, where does the education for that come from? Because I know a lot of coaches here in Sweden, and I obviously go to them for advice with CSGO and what's going on here, and they show me things that have happened, and it's mind blowing to me. I'm never going to reach that level of complexity, but and I'm always saying, was that person hacking? Because I can't get that ability with my 1,500 hours to know, right? So there's a huge meta conductor language needed there for the coaches. How do you? Is that just you? Or are you pulling people saying and grooming them to be a coach or bringing them up, or what's happening with that?
Yeah, the coaches historically in esports have been former players. I mean, obviously, and I will continue to see that. But as we go forward, there will be more formal training for coaches coming through. I mean, there are some like online training things, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous. People can get like coaching certified. There's organizations like Gamer Sensei that will train coaches or people to be coaches. And 99% of coaches in esports are former players. And that's what's true of traditional sports. I mean, it's hard to find professional coaches anymore for any sport that are not former players at least a decently high level. There are some, but most of them are former players. We have a coaching certificate here where we are training some of our players to become coaches. So while they're also competing on teams, they're getting a coaching certificate and understanding how to do like player management, team management, micro versus macro training, and understanding different metas in different games. Player communication, looking at the psychology of gaming is a big part of it too, because a lot of players that become coaches without any kind of training don't understand player management. Yeah, they can get the X's and O's, but they can't become a leader to get a team to follow and understand what they're saying and act on what they're saying. And so there's more to coaching than just being a good player. And that's true of traditional sports. It's taken time to get to that level. And that's what we're starting to do here at Shenandoah, but as well as other places, is to have some formalized training to help people get to that level of really understanding what coaching means at that highest level, not just, again, the X's and O's of running through a practice, but how to run a good and a quality VOD review is something that we do. How to understand the tools that go with VOD review, how to look for things.
What's
a
VOD review for anyone listening? What's a VOD review?
Yeah, video on demand. So going over gameplay footage of their game or of another team that they're competing against. Just like people would do that in traditional sports, they'd watch another team play to pick up on tendencies or to watch what they did wrong. So the same thing is true of esports. And so running those sessions, it takes a certain amount of proficiency and a certain amount of skill to get the most out of those sessions in a timely manner. So we're getting more organized with that kind of training. I am not an esports coach. I coached my Overwatch team for about a month before I realized I am way in over my head. I coached baseball and football when I was, coaching in high school, but coaching collegiate Overwatch was way out of my league because the players are better than the coaches in a lot of ways these days. But that's also true of traditional sports, right? There's a reason that Phil Jackson was coaching the Bulls or the Lakers, not playing for the Bulls or the Lakers. Right. And so coaches, they're kind of past their prime, but they were good back in their day. But their players are better than they probably ever were because that's how progression works. So that's what we see, Brian, these days with coaching. We're training the coaches, we're training the trainers, but a lot of them will come from that playing background to start.
Okay, I just have one more question for me, and Steph, you can ask a question after this. But I'm keeping a diary of my CS:GO experiences, and this happened the other day where I actually said, how impactful is intelligence or IQ to myself? Because I was watching these guys getting kills, but on my team, but really not thinking and not having an awareness, not they're like drones. And then you see football, you talk about someone like Wayne Rooney, who played for DC United, mm-hmm. and he's perceived as dumb, and Beckham's perceived as dumb, but they're not. I mean, the amount of complex calculations to go into these millisecond reactions, and if that they're actually maybe not eloquent when they speak after a game, but in terms of branding, you've Beckham. In terms of on-field decisions, you've Wayne Rooney and stuff. So both. I guess I'll put both of you. You've got the music. Aaron, how smart do these people who've done their 10,000 hours with their Tiger Mom over their shoulder have to be a truly good? Is there mechanics, or is there that extra layer of goes through that? So Aaron first.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so we're talking about kind of this level of intelligence. And again, this marks, as an educator, there are different levels of intelligence. There are different mm-hmm. intelligences, right? You can be emotionally astute as well as physically astute and mentally. And even then, mentally, we know that there's different levels of intelligence. And so when we talk about scenarios in which you have to respond very quickly, students and not just players in general, to answer your question, yes, you could be extremely talented at a certain task, right? And have other boxes not checked. That doesn't mean that you're less intelligent or that you're, that kind of needs to go away as well. I think we've working on that really hard as a society.
Okay, well, have you ever met a high-level world-class musician who's a bit dumb?
I'm not going to throw any of my colleagues under the bus, but
you're supposed to say no.
No. Of course.
Tell me afterwards. I'll look them up.
Right. No, and see, that's the thing too, is this idea that that we put people on a certain pedestal, or we think that they should be a certain way because they perform a certain way, and I think that. Again, you don't know what's gone into the hours of time. And that's the other thing. This kind of behind the curtain situation with We Play Together was part of that too. Really bringing to the surface, it takes a lot of time. You could be ultra talented at something, but at the end of the day, if you want an edge, you have to make sure that how you're learning that said thing and how you're actually practicing that said thing actually informs your performance, right? It's really, really important. We have this conversation in music all the time. There are people that are naturally talented, but we say this in music constantly. Talent will only take you so far. And we see this in esports as well, right? there are players out there that are extraordinarily talented, but without a level of training or training intelligence, like they just burn out, or they find their end, and that's it. That's the end of it. And that's sad because they have something to give, and that's something that we want to change as well.
And Joey, I mean, the same question. I mean, is there a wall that can hit these teams where you just go, why didn't you think to do that? Maybe you're good at shooting, but you can't get a team game senses, which I was told I have 20% on Dust 2 and CSGO by my friend who was a former world champion, but 20% is better than nothing. Anyway, so that game sense and intelligence.
No, they're all idiots. All gamers are no. Obviously, there's a lot of intelligence that goes into competing at a high level. And Brian nailed it. Game sense, right? Game sense versus mechanical ability are two very different things. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of players, when they're young, they rely on their mechanical ability, their hand-eye coordination, their reaction times. They rely on they're clicking heads, right? They know how to click heads. They know how to hold some angles. That's about it. As they get older and play more, obviously you're developing that game sense as you go. And so it takes time to get there, but that's why these veteran players, when their mechanical ability starts diminishing, their game sense goes up and they get into coaching much more than playing because they understand the strategy that goes into this. And it's very high level thinking. And it's similar with traditional sports. Look at Rob Gronkowski for the, I guess, Tampa Bay Bucks now here in American football. The guy looks like an absolute moron when he's off the field because he's slamming beers, he's going partying. He's brilliant because he's developing a brand and he's making millions of dollars based on his personality. And he got out of the game for a while, retired, before he really hurt himself and he started getting CTE and concussions and all that stuff. So athletes they play at a very high level physically, but also mentally is off the charts. I mean, an American football playbook is incredibly thick, and you've got to understand all of that. And it goes for all the players. And I know that I get this dumb jock mentality that people have for athletes. It's just not true. So there's a level of intelligence certainly that you need to play at a high level. You can be good physically, or you can be good, thinking wise mentally, but you put those two things together, that's where the pro gamers are. They're good at both of those and they play at a high level to get there. And it's about maintaining that as far as you can. So yeah, you can get good by just clicking heads and being physically gifted, but to get to that next level and have a prolonged career, you've got to have the game sense that goes with your physical and mechanical ability.
Yeah, and I'll tag on to that. In music, we see the same thing. You can have an incredible Suzuki student. We see them. They're like these Wunderkind, right? There's all these kids can play. They're 6 years old and they can play whatever violin sonata. The question then becomes, like, when they get to past that kind of proficiency level, when do they start really becoming artists on their own? And it's the same conversation. When do you start having that level of creativity where you start manipulating the pieces that you've learned, right, to create something new and then set yourself apart from the other people around you? And we see that in esports as well as we've seen in music, as long as we've existed. What really takes that person to the next level and makes them a world-class performer, right?
Innovating.
Or world-class. Yeah.
Yeah. Innovating versus just copying what you've seen other people do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Way better to have a tiger mom playing esports though than you playing the viola. It's like, son, come on, back on Overwatch. Yes, mom.
Hey,
for another 5 hours, right?
There are parents in the United States now who are like having this mentality with their kids. Especially.
Oh, no doubt.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. There was like, I forget his name, but the 13-year-old kid who won the Fortnite World Cup, the first one.
Yeah.
Uga. Yeah. I was trying to remember his real name, but
nobody knows that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I tried. But yeah, like his, they talked about like his dad, like overseeing his practices and stuff like that. And I'm just trying to imagine a world where your parents are like, hey, go play more video games.
It's happening. Scholarships. Yeah. There's $16 million worth of scholarships every year for students in the States to play at the college level. It's insane.
Yeah, my 8-year-old, I mean, we sit down and play Apex, like pretty much, and just to get his mind, because I saw it early on, like there's the similarities. I mean, he plays baseball as well and golf and other little things. And his mental acuity when that comes to that, and just awareness of like where he is and how to team play and like how to collaborate and work with other people is extraordinarily valuable. I mean, what's not to like about that as a parent, but also to teach your child, be with them in that training process. There's no better way to do that and set that example. And he loves it. Like we have such a good time doing it, and we were just talking, Joey has like no kills in Apex and my son has, like 12 or
Zero.
13.
0.
I'm joking. I threw him under the bus.
Wow,
But no,
yeah.
you know,
I'm
it's
gonna
awesome.
get it now just to see how hard it is. I actually
it
haven't
is.
tried it now.
It's
Yeah.
extraordinarily hard, and to see him actually succeed in it with the kind of strategies, you know, and I'm kind of, you know, it's a test subject as well, you know, like, what if we try this, you know, training mod, and then like manipulating situation, and it works, you know. There's things that are cross, that we have the same conversation that I'm just applying from music to games. It's like, yep, that works, and hopefully this could, you know, prove beneficial to other people.
Well, I think we're getting near to the end of time now, guys. So I think the sort of final question, as always, is, you know, and as there's two of you here, two different streams. So we'll start with Aaron, you know, because you're at the top of the screen, where my eyes go. What future research would you like to see in terms of music and esports? What directions are there for people maybe, you know, thinking about doing a thesis on it, or, you know, even a PhD or a master's thesis or anything?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. And I would encourage people to do what we talked about earlier. You know, when you look at, there's so many levels that we didn't bring up. Like, first of all, the kinetic, or kinesthetic rather, not kinetic, kinesthetic response. You know, there's a level of similarity there that's actually quite remarkable. When it comes to me practicing and how I go about cyclical learning, you know, I find a problem, I figure out how to address it, and then I correct it. The same when I'm sitting at the firing range and I'm thinking about people, again, our students here that play Overwatch, you know, they're assessing constantly. What would be cool to see is research that really dials into those processes of assessment, but also that kinesthetic learning. The other thing is mental acuity, right? Of course. What is happening when we play games? We know that there's some research out there with that, and neuroscience a part of that. You know, what is actually going on? But at really high stakes level of performance, what are we doing? How can we mitigate problems? This is so multifaceted. Of course, the physiology side, you know, health and benefits of that. Like, what can we make sure to ensure that players are in it for the long term? They're not getting hurt. We're doing things to ensure that they're safe and they're healthy. That goes the same for music and esports. And then I would like to see, again, just this idea of music as performance and esports as performance. Like that. Let's go back to why we do what we do. We do it because it's fun and there's a joy to it. One of the things I remind my music students, we have this long tradition, but sometimes we forget. We forget that we're entertainers at the end of the day. I know that's a dirty word amongst high class artists, but we bring joy to people, because we found joy in it to begin with. And that's super important in gaming as well as music. And just to talk about the social aspect of that, those two are very similar when it comes to that and how people enjoy them. And I think that is a level of research that is, even though it's more subjective, I think it's valuable and is actually really foundational to what we do.
I mean, Joey, I mean, are you going to sort of, do you have another angle on that, or do you have something you want to say about esports research in general outside the music that you'd like to see done?
Yeah, I'm not near as eloquent as Dr. Hardwick is, but
New Dr. Hardwick,
yeah,
5 days.
Right, 5 days old. You know, research is obviously going to be critical for the growth of the industry. It's what we've seen in sport management as well, and it took some time to get there. You know, I want to see more research on the performance, on the physiology side of things, on the optimal fitness levels to optimize performance. That's incredibly important at the pro level and the collegiate level, but also the longevity of these players beyond playing, making sure they're healthy past their playing career. You know, from me and the research I'm currently engaged in with Nico and Seth Jenny, really looks at the academic programs in a lot of ways. What academic programs exist out there or esports, whether in the athletic training, the performance side, whether it's in the management side, the media and communication side, you know, where are the academic programs? How are they being set up? Where are the new ones popping up? What are they offering? Are they being set up correctly to make sure that we're getting our students the knowledge and education to get them ready to work in esports or outside of esports with those skills they learn? So that's what I'm currently engaged in, and that's where my interest lies. I'm not a person that understands physiology as much as a lot of other people I work with. I'm much more on the marketing, the revenue generation side of things than I am on that side. So I want to see more research done, you know, really across esports, because it's such a new area that we still have to understand it from an academic perspective, where it fits in, but then also from a practical perspective, where the research can lead to that makes those practical implications that people that are working at the professional level can understand how to implement those the results and things that are coming out of the research that's being done. And a lot of what we need to see is longitudinal studies. I mean, that's how we're going to get, the big best practices in esports performance, is looking at, the next 2 to 5 years will be very indicative about how esports practices and training is set up, because of the research being done right now that just takes time to collect the data and to generate results that are transferable across different games, transferable across different countries, to really get the most impact out of it. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it. I'm glad that I'm not doing it, because there are much better researchers out there than I am. But I'm happy to read it and contribute where I can. But my focus is more on the academic side and the practical hands-on approach. Where does experiential learning fit in? How do we get students out there to help work in the industry on the management side for the longevity of esports as a whole, around the world? Where does, international studies fit in? Where does, global competencies, where do those fit into esports managers and the next generation of managers? So I think that's important too, because esports is such a global realm that it really is across countries right now in a way that other sports are not. And so I think that those competencies are important. That research will be important, but really all research around esports is going to be important, because there's not much beyond what is esports. That has been like beat to death at this point, about defining esports and research. Okay, we've gotten there. What are the next steps we can get to? Where is the actual empirical evidence showing where esports can and will be done? But as far as where I go, it's going to be much more the management side, the academic side, and I'll let people like Aaron get more of the high level thinking when it comes to like the music side and how that fits in. Dr. Pi here, or Seth and Nico, when it comes to the fitness side, I'll let them work on that stuff, because they're working on a whole nother level than I'm at.
And as a last minute plug, I meant to mention that because we teach video game music here at Shenandoah, and I teach that class. One of the things we found out from our esports students here is that sound, right, when it comes to competitive gaming, that came to the forefront. We had some world-class composers actually come and join the class, which is awesome to hear their perspective, how they create sound for like Overwatch. Now, I think it's appropriate to say Adam Burgess joined us from Overwatch in one of our classes and talked about the purpose behind competitive sound, the intent behind. And our players were like, this is a conversation. I told them, you guys are being empowered in an area that not many people get to. You get to inform that. Like, I'm playing a game and sound says, and I'm responding to that. That's extraordinarily important. That level of research and how that's informed in competitive gaming is something that I think we really need to dive into more, so that people that are designing the sound in these competitive games can really do the best for our players as well.
No, absolutely. And I just wear these headphones doing this now because my office is so hot that, sitting here I can sweat to death. But I've realized that, like, the CSGO, especially the sound perceptions. There's Johnny behind me, little bat cat. Hello, bat cat. So that, I think it's amazing, guys. I think that's it's a brilliant program, and I think we're very much looking forward to seeing more happen, and actually more collaborations. I think will be very good in future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, a Ryder Cup in esports, Europe versus America.
That'd be awesome.
Come on,
that would be great.
Bring it.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Aaron and Joey, for being with us today. This was awesome, and Johnny, of course.
Can't forget me about Johnny.
No.
But no, seriously, this was so informative, and I think the stuff that you guys are doing is so cutting edge and innovative, as we've been saying, and really, again, redefining the ways we think about training and we think about performance in esports. And I think I speak for Brian and myself when I say that's kind of where we'd like to see esports continue to head, and it's a good model for that kind of path forward. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll post links to y'all's socials and about your project or whatever you want below this video for those of you who are watching the video stream, and or some other details about it if you're listening on the audio version. Thanks so much, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for having us. This is great.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having us. We really appreciate it.